Hello, and welcome to Sidebar with your host, Amrutha. Happy Tuesday. For today's episode, we have a very special guest. I'd like to welcome Bianca Silvestro.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be on the podcast today, and hopefully, we'll get into some useful law school related topics and beyond.
And Bianca is a fellow TikTok creator in the law school space. And I think it's so important. We need more of that because, frankly, I feel like in a lot of ways, you don't figure out what goes on in law school until you're actually there. And not many people are open to talking about their experience in law school. I almost wish that when I was a 1L, I had more of these videos out there that were walking me through the process and reassuring me when I was stressed out at various points or kind of showing me the ropes. And so I just think your videos are incredible and you're helping out so many people by putting it out there. And I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about your business because you also help pre law students.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we obviously both do content creation, and I didn't expect this to happen essentially. I didn't expect to start a business when I put my first video out there on TikTok. I think I'm a very outgoing person. I wanted to see what would happen if I started to share my journey with other people. And that really started with like a reaction video of my LSAT score, which, as cheesy as it may be, I thought it was a fun video. I worked very hard. I had the disappointments. I had come from a maybe lower score range and just wanted to share that with people that if you have the proper set of resources and skills and references throughout that whole process, you can make any sort of improvement. So that was the video that really blew up. And then I started to make different videos. I started testing the waters, talking about, how I raised my score. And I honestly thought that the whole industry is very gate kept. Like it's very expensive and, maybe it's not as accessible as it should be. And it really helps perpetuate, those larger gaps within LSAT disparities and score ranges and things like that. So I wanted to make the information free and accessible to start. Obviously, I am somebody who supports myself at, my young age, and I knew I needed a little bit more to help me. So I started my business also, and I knew it would help me reach more people in a more intimate way. And so my business is called AmplifyAcademy. It specializes in test prep. So I've done mostly LSAT. I have dabbled into SAT related things as well, believe it or not. And then I also do like essay editing and mentorship on the side. So that's kind of like an overview, but basically TikTok and content creation for me is a way for me to market myself and my services that I provide, but also just give people content because I also used to be in the creator fund. I'm not anymore because like TikTok has a lot of regulations on like you can't have a certain amount private. And when I was going through recruiting, I privated a lot of stuff. And so as of now, I can confidently say I'm not taking a dime from my videos, whether I like it or not.
It's really hard to balance putting information out there and helping people and also just like the inherent privacy that comes in a lot of legal spaces. And so I just think you've done a nice job navigating that. And I think again, like it kind of feels weird because I think we're like the first generation to really be doing that. And so it's really exciting. But I just know that your viewers are like so lucky to have you. And we're so lucky to have you on the podcast today. Welcome to Sidebar, your weekly 30-minute call with the 3L. We'll talk about all things law school admissions, law school, and big law. I want to start by just like talking about what we've been up to. Bianca and I like just were chatting about how we both have like these briefs that we're working on. So we're like really in the thick of law school. I had this brief for this moot court competition I'm doing, and it was due Friday at 2 a.m. Actually, originally it was due last week, Friday at 2 a.m. And when I say I literally like planned for that to be my deadline, I went to the Bahamas that weekend and I planned that trip intentionally knowing that I would hit submit on my brief, hopping on a flight the very next day. And last week I was so busy doing all these interviews and doing all these like various sorts of things for law school. And when they pushed the brief deadline by a week, I feel like most people would have been like, oh, that's great news. But me and my partner were doing the brief together. I'm like writing the plaintiff's brief. He's doing like the defendant's side. And we're both like such like crazy type A people that we're like, all right, now this is an opportunity for us to do like even more research. But like usually you kind of try to finish up the reading and then you're in the proofreading phase at that point. But I ended up staying up till like 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. Thursday night working on this brief. Woke up early the next day, stayed up until 2 a.m. We hit submit 2 minutes before 2 a.m. So
Wow.
yeah, and so I don't think I've recovered from that, but like there's like this like I love the brief writing process and there's a lot of joy I get out of it, but it's also like objectively insane because you're just sitting there
Mhm.
on a laptop and just like and me and my friend, we were like in the library until it shut down, migrated over the study rooms in my building until 2 a.m. The people working here thought we were insane.
Yeah, so that's so funny, and I agree, it is so much just on your eyes, like, that's, like, the first thing I have to say is yesterday, I was working on my brief for, like, 9 hours straight, and by the end, I was like, "I can't read it through again." Like, I physically can't go through the brief again, it gets to be very overwhelming, but I agree that it's like your baby in a way. Like, you are trying to give it the most support and love and nurture it in such a weird analogy, but it's really true. Like, this is your prized possession and you want to make it better. And that's pretty awesome. I feel like most people would have just still not touched it for that next week, but that's really awesome that you guys kept going. I imagine how much you wanted to sit back and just not do that, but like props to you. And my brief is due Tuesday. I am in a legal writing course. So, for anyone who doesn't know, in 1L, you have legal writing. At least at my school, it's a whole year. I would imagine, hopefully, at other schools, it's also a full year. I think we started with it was an objective closed world memo. So it's like you're given the sources, like training wheels are on. And then at the end of last semester, you do the objective open world memo. So it's like go on Lexis and Westlaw and do your thing. And then now we're doing a persuasive memo, which is AKA a brief. And it's also open world, obviously, like you're just doing the real thing now. So ours is on like trade secret misappropriation. And
Oh, I love.
it sounds cool in theory, but the trade secrets are like sales software. Like it's like incredibly boring, unfortunately, but I'm still finding joy in writing it, and so that's been interesting. I did put it off a little longer than I would have liked. After recruiting all started, getting ourselves excited again, for that intensity of our academic lives was a little challenging, but we're doing it. And, today is going to be a big day for me. It's also my first time writing a brief.
So I teach the first year writing course along with the professor in my school. And so that's a lot of what I've been hearing with my students too. And we have the exact same layout, like closed universe, open universe. Now we're moving on to the persuasive advocacy. And I think it's so much more fun. So I think you're like in for a treat this semester. And I can just see you being so well suited to that kind of work too. And it feels like real lawyering in a way. In a law firm, you're often writing objective analysis to show the partner or someone else. But like, I think persuasive writing is like kind of what we litigators came here to do. So it's very exciting. And you kind of touched on something really important. So a lot of my students have been like really struggling with like balancing recruiting and what's been going on with like legal writing and everything else this semester. At Penn, in the spring of your 1L year, we have an additional class as well. So they're stressed. And I think this leads to the next point. 1L recruiting is so different from every year before it. And my year was very unique as well. Um, Back in the day, they used to do big law recruiting, your 2L fall. Now it's all happening at some point, like your 1L. And so I think we should just jump into it and get started talking about your timeline.
Okay, so recruiting was crazy. I think this is also like the only thing we knew. So for what it's worth, it was crazy, but I didn't know what to expect. So I was going with the flow. I think the first sort of talk I heard about recruiting was probably late September. Our school, we knew they were going to host something in November of like 60 different firms to come here, which obviously very, very early. I think some firms started opening up their applications like October 1st. There's a lot of pushback like, do we wait to apply? Our career development service people were like, no, you should apply in November. And a lot of us were applying anyway. It was very chaotic. However, I need to say, like, my school had such great resources and support, and like everybody had all hands on deck trying to figure it out. So even if it was a little crazy, there was nothing more we could have done to handle it. We were sending on applications, at least I was sending on applications in October, very early, to like anything and everything. So I think that was like a part of me being nervous and scared. And obviously, we only have finals grades. So I had no idea where I stood among my peers. And anything that was open and in New York, I was submitting. Maybe like the 70 and up, like, I mean, maybe, yeah, 70 something firms. But it was a little bit hard to say what was 1L and what was 2L, because I don't know if you were tapped into this, but some firms started off offering like a 1L summer position, and they realized, like, hey, we're just going to lose talent to people recruiting for both or for just 2L. So then people or firms were literally morphing their applications into combined 1L, 2L offerings. So it's really hard to say what was what, but overall, I think it was over 70 firms. And the ironic part is that I probably didn't send my transcript at the end to more than 20. So, maybe that was a little much, but I do think I'm someone who'd rather be safe than sorry. To continue my timeline, so October started the applications, November started the applications. We had our big firm event here in Ithaca on November 5th. And then I kept applying. I probably didn't have my first interview. I actually had a screener maybe like late October, but it was really random. And then I never heard from them again beyond that. And then I would say my first official interview was probably around Thanksgiving or early December, around like that early December after Thanksgiving, like a full callback or something. And I had a couple of those, but then there were moments where I had to make decisions. Am I going to study for finals, or am I going to sit for an interview? And obviously, this is like a whole different beast. But with the networking stuff, that was also that same kind of conundrum. Do I go and network with people, or do I study? Because the grades versus connections dilemma is something that nobody has really mastered, and you are kind of gambling with. And then we took our finals in mid-December. Our grades were some of the first grades to come out, which I cannot thank my school enough for. I think that was when people started to get really freaked out, when some schools were releasing grades. Ours were like January 6th, and then some
Wow.
other law schools weren't until like late January. And I mean, I think late January, like maybe 50% of my peers had jobs or offers at least. So I actually have no statistics backing any of that up, but from what I'm perceiving around me, it was kind of like once we got the grades, that's when things really started to pick up. And, hopefully for a lot of people. And I think people at my school have had great success in their big law opportunities and offers and endeavors and things like that. But it's still going on. I think there was a massive wave in the beginning of the new year, and I'm done. So maybe I'm more tapped out to it, but there's definitely waves that keep occurring. So it's a little unclear how long this will go on, probably for the foreseeable future.
It's really interesting you said that, like, your school's official OCI. Do you guys also call it OCI?
So yes, and then that's like in a couple weeks virtually.
Okay, so like, but they encourage you to start applying in November.
Yeah, I mean, they were like, hey, just wait until November 1st, which was weird because there were things open before then. We were encouraged to wait until November 1st.
Yeah, so that's like that is interesting. I think so at my school they had like the formal application process over winter break, and I don't know to what extent they told students to wait, but I know that my year they did tell us to wait by a certain time, and it was like in summer after 1L. And at that point in the firm I was working at, other people had already gotten like first round, second round interviews. And I think the schools like try to have everyone wait so it doesn't unfairly disadvantage students within that school, but then it kind of like creates this weird like it just makes that school so much different from other schools, and it seems like everyone's on their own timeline, whereas these firms are, it's sort of like law school admissions where there's like a bucket of applicants and they're filling them as they see them. And so it's really interesting. I think schools are always trying to balance like, okay, what's like a reasonable month where we can do this without overwhelming the students, but also like if you do it a little bit too late, you're going to disadvantage your students as well. Anyways, I just thought that was interesting. I'm always curious to see what's happening at other schools, but it seems like generally speaking, it's like schools have known that this is coming and they're like pushing up the timeline to accommodate it, so that's good. I'd love to hear like how you went about recruiting, going to like firm events, connecting with attorneys as a 1L fall student, because honestly, when I was well, like month one, two, three of law school, I was still trying to wrap my mind around like going to classes, like what it even means to be a lawyer, what are the types of law. Like I don't know if that I could have had an intelligent conversation with an attorney that early on. Like how did you do it?
Yeah, that's a great point. And for a little background context for anyone who doesn't know me, I'm 21. I'll be 22 soon, but I am a KJD. I'm a super KJD. I don't have any formal work experience other than starting my business while I was a senior, junior,
Which
whatever you
is
want
huge. I just
to.
want to say like
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't want to downplay my work experience, but it's not formal work experience. So, I didn't have experience in a firm. Of course, I had like summer experience, but I also do think my business was a more niche, different lens and allowed me to have more intelligent conversations. So, I really don't know how I would have navigated so well without that. Of course, I would have probably adapted and talked about something else, but I think it was a strength. However, I didn't start going to firm events. Let's see. Well, actually, our school had some law firms come for like lunches. Like, I don't know if you guys had this like random lunches where they would do like a panel and we would eat. And, I think that might have been like in October, one of the first ones, even maybe earlier. And so maybe I think it started like once a week, but then it was like 3 days, 4 days a week. There was a
wow.
firm with a lunch. And then at first we were all like scrambling to sign up. That was the vibe, right? And then I'm like, actually, I can't do this. Like I can't do my readings and study and go to these random lunches. And I also knew like we had been told, the grades are a lot of the picture. You need to have the grades there or else the networking means nothing. And
Yeah.
that stuck with me. When someone said that to
Mm,
me, I was like, okay, the grades are necessary but not sufficient, right? So, the networking may not even be necessary. I mean, it's all a guessing game. I did go to a lot of these different lunches. There were like dinners, anything at night. I said no. Lunches, maybe I was on campus. That made more sense. I was going to stop and eat with my friends anyway. We're a very social group. We're going to waste that time regardless. And, so why not be productive with it and connect with some people? I, would send follow up emails to recruiters. Like I wasn't really the one staying and talking to every panelist. I was reasonable about it. I wasn't overload with my networking demeanor or whatever. And then I would say when we had that firm event here where it was like a ton of firms, that was when I really locked in. That was when I like turned it on. And then after that event that night, there was like many dinners. So you could like sign up to go, like hopefully you would get selected to go to that dinner. So that night was like a 5 hour night. And I really like tried to get the most out of it possible. And I was like the first person in there. I knew if I could have one-on-one time with these different recruiters and, summer associates and associates, whoever they were, that was going to be the best reward. So I did just that. I talked to dozens of firms, but more so just the ones I was curious about and I maybe had a previous connection with and I liked the vibe. Honestly, all we had was vibes to go off of. The only reason I knew where I wanted to work or had an idea was based off of the culture and the people and maybe other random things you wouldn't normally think about. So that night, I did a lot of networking, a lot of connecting, LinkedIn, emails, whatever. Beyond that, I didn't do too much. I did do some like coffee chats, like randomly. I would set up calls with people who graduated from my school. I think that's really big. Go and connect with people who work at a place you want to work, who have graduated or summered there. That is huge. Like if your alumni network is strong, I encourage you to take advantage, because it ended up being probably the reason why I am where I am, because somebody really vouched for me when, we had that in common. And I, was at that firm event with this person and we were chopping it up the whole night. So I think it does really help with the alumni system and making these genuine connections.
I also felt like going to these recruiting events weren't the best use of my time, and if anything, made me like less focused on academics, or just like I wasn't like a super bubbly, super energetic person when it's like 8 p.m. and it's dinner and I've been up since like 7 and in classes all day. So Bianca, I have a question for you. Did you actually go to the firm event of the firm that you committed to going?
Yes, they were
Okay.
at that big event. So that they
Okay.
actually didn't do anything like one-on-one with my school, but I actually did not get into the dinner. So there was like they had a dinner after the event and I was like on the wait list, and I literally emailed the recruiter like, "Hey, do you have another spot? Like I really want to come." And I'd never heard back. So I it was like literally like a couple hours before, right? But I was like, these people are going to get the job, I would have loved to be at that dinner. And I remember being like, maybe it's not meant to be. Like, of course, I'm being like so dramatic, but at that big firm event, I stayed at that firm's table for an hour and a half out of the 3 hours. Like, I mean, I was literally wrapped up in natural conversation for the far majority of my time. And there were 60 other firms there. And I remember walking out of that firm event being like, wow, I better do decent, like, because I was nervous. I felt a lot of pressure. Like, I really fell in love with these people at this particular firm, and we had such a great vibe, and I loved everybody. Everybody was so like uniformly amazing, like in a way. They all had their own personalities, but they were very outgoing and sociable. And that's something I was really looking for. So I think I left knowing like I really want to be here. This is the place for me. Yet I thought it may have been unattainable in the moment. Like I just naturally, right? Like I was absolutely nervous. I had no idea what was in store, no idea how to take a law school final, and I knew I needed to do it pretty well. So that's where I was at.
Okay, so that makes sense. So you went to this event and you met like attorneys from a lot of firms, but then you like kind of zeroed in, this is the firm I want to be at. Did you reach out to 3Ls at that point? I know you mentioned like connecting with the alumni network, because I also feel like 3Ls can be really good, or 2Ls, they can be really good people to vouch for you, because
Mm.
they want to advocate for you because you're going to the same school. And then hopefully they also like are familiar with the attorneys at the firm or the recruiters, and so they can like get you connected.
Yeah, absolutely. I then went like searched firm name, my law school in LinkedIn, and I talked to anybody who is like a couple years out or 2L, 3L. So they also did like a 1L summer program. So like 2Ls were also fair game, 3Ls, and then alum. And I probably talked to 4 people. It doesn't sound like a lot, but this firm does not take many from my school. I think it might have been 4 or 5 people total. And then the one person who is a partner who I really connected with at the event in November. He was actually in the Boston office and didn't have ties to New York, except that I think now that I know more, he's very involved in general. So I kept in touch with him, but I honestly would like send him an email being like, hey, like, I want your input. Like, how can I get a screener? How can I get an interview? Like, this is all that I'm doing. I've connected with all these different people. I also wanted to sound confident and not desperate. So I think that's something to keep in mind. I think I realized that very early on. I am also an asset. I am something that they would be very happy to have too. You
Yes.
you gotta act
Yes.
like that. If you seem like you're dying to get an offer or an interview, that's not the most. I don't know what the word is, like attractive sort of trait for a young aspiring attorney. So anyway, I digress. I emailed him a few times. I think I would hear from him, occasionally. He'd be like, hey, Bianca, good to hear from you. Very light and casual. And then once I got my grades, the day I got my grades, I attached like the transcript to my email to this partner. Like, again, not a recruiter, but he was the only person that I really connected with. And I was pretty relentless with. And I sent it to him. And then, like, that same day, I got a call back. He signed off on the screener. And so, I really
Oh,
owe him a lot and for putting up with me being relentless and knowing what I wanted. But I was really nervous that I would be indecisive going through this process, and I think it turned out to be the opposite. So you really never know.
that's such a sweet story. Like you really wanted it and you got it and it's through your own hard work. And so I just want to like commend you for that. I will also say I think what you said when you were like I'm totally digressing. I think it's such an important point. You don't want to come off like you're sending repeated emails and you're like borderline annoying anyone at the firm, especially a partner, because they have so many things to do.
Hmm.
And I think it's really important to be respectful, but also like this is such a hard balance, but also be confident because you will be an asset to their team and you shouldn't be like so humble that you're not standing tall in your own way. And it's really hard to describe, but this can even come off in like an email. Like you can read in an email when someone like isn't confident and they're kind of expecting you to do all the legwork for them versus when you're like I'm doing all these things, can you be someone who vouches for me? And so I'm sure you executed that really well and also very proud of you because it's really hard going straight through not really having that professional experience but then still being able to carry yourself in a way that's I guess confident and professional and like give someone the impression that you would handle yourself really well in a corporate setting. And so that's awesome. And then I guess like moving on to the actual interview stage, did you interview at a lot of places?
I think in total, I completed about 8 to 10 callbacks. That was because once I got the callback and their then offer of the firm I wanted to be at, like no matter what, I pulled everything else. I probably had another 8 to 10 scheduled beyond that point that I withdrew. So I probably, again, ended up completing 8 to 10. I probably did a handful of like 4 to 5 random screeners before then. I also will comment, I think it's so interesting. Some firms were like skipping the screeners, some of them were doing screeners. And I honestly think that may have disadvantaged some firms. This is just like maybe my opinion because they had multiple stages, whereas some firms were just so hungry. They were doing callback and maybe offer a couple days later. So, their timelines were vastly different. And that also got interesting once I got my first offer. My first offer was not the offer that I took. I got that probably the week after I got my grades, so maybe January 11th, 12th or so. And then once I got that first offer, it was really exciting and flattering and I really enjoyed the people at the firm. So I also just knew I probably wasn't going to go there. I don't know why. I think deep down, I was definitely hanging on to
Yeah.
the place I saw myself at the most. And then with that offer, let's call it again like January 12th or so, that week, sometime within that week, I went back to firms I had interviewed at completely. So the interviews that were callbacks, I sent them this offer essentially. I told them, "Hey, I got an offer on this date. It has a 2-week expiration. Just wanted to let you know I remain very interested in your firm." Of course, it was a very nice email, but it was more to the point and I just told them I would still love to have the opportunity, to maybe work at their firm, something along those lines. So then maybe the next 2 or 3 days, maybe two, I had offer and then offer from firms again I had completed my callbacks with. So informing them that I had an offer moved the timeline. So definitely encourage anyone to do that. It also does feel awkward, right? Being like, "Hey, you speed it up." But it's a normal part of the process. And as long as you're respectful about it, I think it's totally normal. Okay, so let's say that week passed. I had my first offer, second, third, very quick, back to back. I was still waiting. I didn't really know what I wanted. I was very excited about the offers I was getting. I was very flattered and excited. And I think I would be happy at any of those firms, genuinely. That next Monday, we had no class because it was Martin Luther King Day. And that is when I actually had the flu the entire weekend before that. And
Oh
on that
no.
day, I had the highest fever I've ever had. I had 102.6-degree
Oh
fever.
my
And
God.
I woke up that day and I had the callback on this day. This was the callback of the firm that I really wanted. And I also had like a screener right before it. So it was a busy day, but the screener I used as like my test run, and it was terrible. Like the worst screener experience. And like on my end, the firm was incredible, but then they ended up, giving me a call back. I was so embarrassed that I was not feeling well. And my thoughts were literally like slow to form. That's how
Mm.
I was so ill. And so anyway, later that day, I had the call back. I like had my best suit on. I literally had like a wet rag like under the suit. That's like how, and I didn't even care. It was like my nicest suit. I was like, pull it together, mind over matter. It's ironic because when I took my final LSAT, I had like herniated a disc like the day before. Like I think it's so
Bianca,
funny.
these are
Like
insane stories. I can't believe, I feel like if I was in your shoes, I would have been like, cancel, cancel.
Well, these are just things that I think naturally happen to me. I don't know why or how, but it honestly makes me better because I feel like I have more to prove or like more on the line. And it really makes me focus in a way that maybe I wouldn't have had to before. Whatever. It was a 3-hour interview. And, I actually found it like easier to be more human with them and be like, listen, if I start like sweating, just don't mind me. I'm not feeling great, and it became more personal and like we're both just two humans at the end of the day trying to connect, trying to
Yes.
see if we're a good fit. And so I honestly really, really enjoyed that interview, as taxing as it was. I think I chugged like 2 Red Bulls right before it and I was feeling great. I had awesome conversations. And I think with the right firm, you aren't going to have to feel like you're someone you're not. Like immediately as I'm
Hmm.
having these conversations, I am like talking about going to workout classes and fitness. Like that's a huge part of my life. And we're just connecting as two people. And of course, we were having discussions about law school and being an attorney. But honestly, at this point, recruiting was so early, we didn't get a lot of questions about why big law, why litigation, why not transactional. We really had minimal conversation about that, which I think was very helpful. And they almost expected that you didn't know anything about the big law industry beyond maybe the bare minimum.
Which I honestly like really appreciated. And I also felt like some of my most fun interviews, we were just chatting about our day to day, who we are as people. And like, I think now that I've sort of like actually talked to a lot of these attorneys that interviewed me or recruiters, they're also trying to figure out who is someone that I'd want to spend like up until 2 a.m. working on a brief with, or I'd want to be around. And I'm like, this is a pleasant person to be around. This is someone that I'd have a good working relationship with. And so they're also trying to suss out your personality and figure out if you're like a cultural fit. And so anyways, I just love interviews where you're just chatting and being a person. And I love what you said about at the end of the day, these are two human beings trying to figure out if they connect. And I think when you break it down to that level, it feels a lot more like one, you feel more motivated intrinsically to find a good fit for you. And then also, two, the entire process, you just put it into perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And I completely agree. This is an opportunity. I tell people all the time, interviewing is an opportunity to sell yourself and
Yeah.
give them something that's not like a 2D piece of paper. So I always love to interview and I get anxious. I get nervous too. I hope people don't listen to this and think, oh, wow, she's just got that natural, excitement about it. Not at all. I came a long way. I was very nervous, very anxious. Oh my gosh, growing up. So it's something I've learned to love and I've practiced a lot for. And I think the confidence factor is huge. I work with so many clients now and I tell them, like literally with their LSAT prep, confidence is a choice. I mean, there's
Mm.
no like score, weight, job, house that will give you confidence. Like you decide to have it or not. And so
I
that's
love
something,
that. That's so
yeah,
good.
yeah. So that's something I always cherished and thought about, even if I was talking to one of the best firms in the world and I'm a 21-year-old from a random, like, average suburb in New Jersey, right? Like, I still somehow decided, yeah, I'm 100% confident that I would be a great fit in this position. And it may not make sense or it may not be proven by much, but I think it's certainly a choice. And that's what I think made me successful. So later on that week of like January 20th or so, it was just a few days later from my call back to offer, which I think was not unusual. And I got the offer, and that was genuinely like the most unexpected thing. Also, one of my good friends here, she and I both loved this same firm. And we didn't talk about it though, ever. I just knew. I had a feeling we both walked out of that event being like, wow, they are awesome. And so we were talking to her. I was talking with her that day. I think it was a Thursday. And she was like, oh, I don't think they are sending out offers like today, and we started to soft launch this idea that we both really loved the same firm. And she said that an administrator at her school said they don't send them on Thursdays. So that was like 6 p.m. And I hang up with her 6:30 p.m. I get like a 212 number, which is like the New York City area code. And at that point I was like, well, it's probably like another firm. And so I'm like, I'm excited, but I'm like, I felt like I was like forcing my excitement at that point. So I answer it, and I'm just listening, and then I hear the voice, first of all, because I knew this voice. I just interviewed with her. I don't know why. I'm pretty good with like voices and who they are. And she says the name of the firm, and I was laying on my bed and I just like shoot up, and I was literally running like back and forth, and like she didn't hear any of it, right? Like I'm just like, wow, thank you so much. Like, but I am just
Aw.
like running, and I was shaking, like, because I was also not expecting it. And I wasn't expecting it, period, because I was like, yeah, okay, I connected with the people, I got the opportunity to interview, but am I, enough? It's such a high accomplishment that I have put, in on this pedestal in my mind that maybe was unattainable, but it was really happening. So that was like the craziest feeling, I felt in a long time. And then I actually like texted my friend, like, well, I called my mom, texted my friend, and I just said, I just got off the phone with her like 30 minutes ago. I texted her WYD, and she calls me in that same second. And she's like, I got it. I got it. And I was like, I got it too. Like, and so it was such I don't know how they call this at the same time, or like, it was just such a crazy, like the stars aligned. So really great experience. And then that same night, like, to kind of not pivot too quickly, but I got a call back from a firm that I was not ever genuinely considering as a possibility. I almost thought of it like, okay, just like the valedictorian or whatever in our class would be interviewed or whatever. Like, I don't know. That's my own perception. And I was like, oh, okay. And that was hard for me because I knew where my heart was. I knew what made sense. I knew where I would thrive. And then I now had this temptation I felt. I didn't know what I wanted. I did schedule that call back for the next day. I was like, if this is a possibility or something, like, I need to know as soon as possible. So super crazy, like, timeline here. That next day sat through like a 4-hour callback.
My
I
God.
did not, feel at home. It's such an amazing firm, and so many people are going to thrive there. It just wasn't me. And I think they knew that too, because went through that whole process, and it took so long to hear a rejection. But when I did get a rejection, I was like, I was really relieved in a way. And, that's just me realizing I may have been put in a position to make a wrong decision. And that's part of this, trying to deduce from very limited information what's really going to feel right. So that next week, I ended up fully committing. And so I sealed up my process with a nice bow, and a little chaotic, but that's it in a nutshell.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. And I think what you said just now was like hilarious because like from anyone else's perspective, Bianca's talking about like firms that are both like at the very tippy top, and it's something that I see a lot of 1Ls go through all the time where they're like, I love this firm, but I feel weird saying no to this other firm and because of the prestige. And mind you, like if you search up Vault 100 or whatever you want to search up, they're like a few numbers apart. But it's crazy how in the legal world, I mean, this is like a funny way of saying it, but like prestige is the pedestal. Like you are always striving to hit what's most prestigious. And I think the fact that you guys are 1Ls and like only like not to like this is not talking down to 1Ls. This is just me remembering how I was
Mhm.
a semester in. There's not much else to go off of because you don't really know
Yeah.
the firms like that. And you didn't even have like a ton of time to get to know the firms because it all happened so quickly. And so it kind of feels like all you have to work with are these concrete numbers that someone else laid out for you. Here's how you should pick, here's the order. And I think like when people find themselves in law school, like people find their own like way of like being true to themselves but being in the legal career, that's like the best thing ever and I love watching it happen because I if you just follow like the cookie cutter process and honestly like even looking at me like I'm doing big law in New York, that is so cookie cutter for my school in a lot of ways. But going with the firm that I really wanted, that I felt like these are people that I really enjoy and I'm going to have friends and like a community out of this. And it sounds like the same exact process for you. Selecting a firm is really important because a lot of things are like out of your hands or you're just sort of like listening to the advice of others around you. But I think when you have that gut feeling or if it's in your heart, if it's in your gut, wherever it is, like take it and listen to it. Because you don't want to look back and then think, what would have happened if I went here? And then maybe I would have been happier because these big law hours are long, which I'm not going to scare you with talking about yet, because that's like a future
Yeah.
problem. But
Yes.
yeah.
100%. And I just want to say exactly what you said. Like, that's all we knew. And I think we go to great law schools, right? I mean, we can't say we ignore prestige. That would be really not truthful and not transparent. However, I think you really do need to listen to your gut. It's not all about the numbers. And I know people who maybe have picked something based off prestige and been really unhappy in the past. And people lateral all the time. People move around for
Mhm.
those reasons, right? That it's more about the fit and the culture. And so if I could give anybody advice who's going into this process now or will be next year, like listen to your gut, make sure that you connect with these people because that's who you're going to be working with. Like you said, in those long nights, long hours. I also was never somebody who went with my gut per se. I think I was much more like rational. Not that the two can't be, existing at the same time, but I never was one to say, oh, go with your gut. However, this process where that's really all you have, I 100% support that. And I think I knew it from the beginning. And listen, not everybody has that experience. So if you don't connect with one firm right away, that's not the norm. Like I must say, I think I had it pretty good in that I just knew, but that's like the most ideal situation ever, right? And of course, how everything worked out perfectly somehow. But I mean, that was never how my life always worked. And for most people, they do have to make tough decisions and have to deliberate, and they have multiple offers. But at the end of the day, we're so lucky to be in this position, and it's the best problem to have, the most like privileged problem to have. And you're doing the best you can, very limited information. So just making sure you would be happy because like you said, like the work's all the same, right? The hours are all the same, and I have no idea what I'm getting myself into.
And the pay is
but
the same, by the way. The pay is like absolutely the same.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you just kind of have to go with the gut, the culture, the people. And, I do think the networking calls and things like that does help because you can tell when somebody talks about their life, their job, and their happiness. I would ask people, like, are you happy? And that really got a very natural, organic reaction out of them that I think speaks volume. You're not completely alone. There are people who are here trying to make this process easier for you. And yeah, just kind of embrace the craziness. I know there was a law school that actually like submitted, I don't know if you heard of this, to like LSAC, like a complaint almost, of like, hey, this is way too early, this process.
Oh yeah.
This is, did you hear? Okay. So
Yeah.
like, I don't know how I felt about that, and I can totally see people on both sides of the issue. But my point in saying that is like, I didn't sign that. I wouldn't have really wanted to do that because this is out of our control. And like, a lot of this is just embracing the chaos and what you can't control. There are, unfortunately, chaotic timelines that happen out of nowhere, and that has been like a crazy chase, especially with like now these bonuses and whatever. And we are just, a little bit detached from all that. So we might as well just embrace it. Mhm.
So Bianca referenced like bonuses. Basically, firms right now are hiring for their second year because they found that when they hire solely for their first year, a lot of those students don't return. So it's kind of like ends up being a waste of money and time and connecting with students who don't come back. And usually, where you go your second year is the return offer you take for after you graduate. And so I think it makes sense why firms would want to hire for their second year or maybe like kind of lock you in for both 1L and 2L year. But they're also offering these bonuses to first year law students for that summer. And it's almost as much, or like I think it is as much as like you would make if you were doing an entire summer associate program that first year. But now you could do like public interest work, or you can do almost nothing at all, is what I've heard as well.
Mhm.
Um, and so I have no idea how things will shake out next year. But my like last sort of question from you is what advice would you give to future students who are coming in next year? And I don't know if their timeline is going to be like fall or like I can't imagine it being summer before entering law school and then working with undergrad. I really don't. I think it's really important how you talked about kind of like going with the punches. Like it's crazy, but you have to stay ahead of it. And I mean, that's kind of how like legal practice works too. And that's just kind of how life works. And so, do you have any advice for students on how to do that? I know this is a super
Yeah.
open ended question.
The first thing that comes to mind is study hard. I know we just talked about all of this job stuff, all of this networking, interviewing. Study hard, do practice exams and problems as soon as you can, outline as early as you can. I think the academic side cannot be overstated. I do think there is a balance of being a great interviewee and a great academic or a great student. I do know people with great grades. Like that was not a promise to the dream firms and to every single firm, right? It wasn't a guarantee at any firm. However, it's pretty important. That varies, of course, and we could get all into that. That's a whole different discussion. But you do need to have both, I think, for a lot of these amazing firms, the grades and the interviewing skills. So if your school offers interviewing prep or mock interviews, take advantage, prepare. I know I think at our school there's this professor who like drills people and he just does it for fun in terms of like really hard interview questions. So do that because I think I am very confident in my interview abilities, but that took a lot of work and that is not something that comes natural for a lot of people. So that combined with the grades, it's very hard to know how your time should be allocated. And I just don't have a good answer. But I think, especially like a month before finals, I had like a calendar laying out everything I was doing every day. I stuck to none of it, I will admit, and it was chaotic. It was a mess. Like I can't portray myself as being someone who like had every day mapped out and I did it all perfectly. Oh my gosh, it was absolutely a disaster at times. However, I was doing a ton of practice every day and essays. And I really also learned what each professor wanted. So ensuring that I was tailoring my exams to different people, I absolutely do not think I knew the most. I do not think I was the smartest or, smarter than some people who did less good than me. Like that's how strategic some of these exams can be. So think of it like that and how to play to your audience. And so, there's a lot of advice all within that, but just make sure you don't get wrapped up in all of this networking, interviewing, recruiting. Make sure you are learning and preparing because, without the performance, you might not be able to really reap the fruit of that other labor. So that is the advice I would have. And also take care of yourself. I didn't in the first like half of the semester, I was getting like 6 hours of sleep. And, I tried harder toward the end to get 8 hours. Now in the second semester, I get 8 hours every night. I've never been happier. I've never been more productive. I've never been like a better version of myself. Sleep is so important. There's like no cheat code around it. And I also work out a lot. I move my body and like it really does need to be a balance. So take care of yourself.
So Bianca hit some really important points. I always say take care of yourself because it's crazy how much better you do at every stage of this process, whether it's doing well on exams or interviewing, you can only really be fully present and able to perform at your ideal capacity if you are treating yourself well and sleeping. I'd also really like to emphasize the academics piece. At the end of the day, you can be the best interviewer ever, but if your grades are not really how you like it first semester, but also beyond, you just never really get law school fully, I do think it's going to translate to you having a harder time in legal practice. And since recruiting is so unpredictable, I think saying that grades totally don't matter and short circuiting the learning process entirely is not necessarily to your advantage. So far in Sidebar, we've been really focused on big law recruiting. And now we're officially switching segments to law school and how to thrive in law school. Big thank you to Bianca. And thank you to you all for listening to this almost hour long episode. And I'm really excited to see you guys next Tuesday.
Bye, guys.